Welcome back to another video in the top-down RPG template tutorial series. In the previous video, we learned about creating various types of items. In today's video, we'll be focusing on interactable actors. Let's get started. To start off, we'll need to create our own data table for interactables using the structure from the documentation. Once we've done that, we'll replace the existing data table on the corresponding composite data table with our own. For our first example, we'll create a shrine that will restore the player's life. We'll set the row name and copy it to the ID field. We'll also determine the interaction distance required for the player to interact with this actor. In this case, we'll make it a one-time interaction, and we'll cover quests and the minimap in a separate video. Next, we'll create a blueprint for our interactable actor. If it's not a chest, NPC, or Waypoint, we'll need to use Interactable Base as the parent class. We'll copy the ID from the data table and set it in the blueprint. Then, we'll add a mesh for the actor and ensure that the mouse detection covers the entire mesh. We'll also add a light that will illuminate when players interact with the actor. And adjust the location of the name widget. For the logic, we'll override the onInteracted event for both the client and the server and define what should happen. In this case, we'll override the server event and fully heal the interacting character. We'll also make the light visible to give players feedback. Finally, we'll place the actor in the level and test it. Players should be fully healed after interacting with our actor. Moving on, let's create a chest. As with every interactable, we'll need to add it to the interactable data table first. For chests, we'll also need to create a separate data table to modify what they will drop when interacted. Don't forget to replace the existing data table on the composite data table as well. Now we can copy the ID of the interactable and paste it in the chest data table. We can then define the gold drop chance and amount, as well as other items and their drop chances. For the blueprint, we'll need to create a child blueprint from the chest base class and set the ID of the chest on the blueprint. We'll add a mesh for the chest and adjust the mouse detection box to cover the mesh. Chests also have another box that determines where the items will drop, which we'll adjust accordingly. Additionally, we'll add another mesh to cover the chest that will be opened when interacted. Ensure that this mesh is replicated. We'll override the onInteracted event for the server and open the chest over time. At the end of the animation, we'll call the Drop Items event and provide the interactor info. Finally, we'll place the chest in the level and test it, ensuring that we receive the drops as we designed. In the next part of our tutorial, we'll create an NPC. To do this, we need to add a new row to the interactable data table. For NPCs, we also need to create a separate data table to further modify them. Make sure to use the same ID in both data tables. Every NPC needs to have a unique data table that contains all the dialogues related to it. Before we continue, let's replace the existing NPC data table on the corresponding composite data table with ours. Now, we can start creating the dialogues. First, we need to create the dialogue data table using the structure from the documentation. Then, we set the dialogue data table for our NPC. The conversation with the NPC always starts with the first row, which we'll name Begin. We can set the dialogue that this NPC will show when interacted, as well as the voice. Force duration determines how long it should take for the text to scroll until the end. The next row name determines the dialogue that should play after this one, and we have choices for the player. For the blueprint, we can use NPC base class as the parent. Set the ID of the NPC on the blueprint. Next, set the mesh and animation. Place it in the level and test. The NPC should display the set dialogue. Notice that the text scrolls very slowly. We can adjust the speed of it from the dialogue data table. Now let's add some choices for the player. We'll have two choices, one for introduction and one for ending the conversation. We can add requirements for each choice that will hide it if the condition is not met. Refer to the documentation to learn more about this. We will provide a next row name for the introduction choice, and we will make sure to create a new row with the same name. We also have a choice action that determines what will happen when this choice is made. Continue proceeds to the defined row name, while end dialogue ends the conversation. We'll have a look at the trade later. We'll provide the dialogue for the introduction and go back to the previous dialogue when it's done. We won't have any choices for the player in this dialogue. Now let's test it again. This time we should be able to see the choices after the first dialogue is over. Clicking Intro will display another dialogue, and it will go back to the previous one when skipped or ended. Remember, every quest-related dialogue needs to be in the dialogue data table as well, but we'll cover that in another video. Also, if you want to create a custom action for the choices, you can modify the choice action enumeration. Let's create a shop NPC now. Start by adding it to the Interactable data table, and then copy the ID to the NPC data table. We'll also need to create a dialogue for the shop NPC, as well as a separate data table for the items they'll sell. Use the structure from the documentation and modify the composite data table accordingly. Next, copy the NPC ID to the shop data table, where we can adjust the inventory size of the shop and add a list of tabs. For example, we could have 2 jewels for the first tab and a life potion for the second, and we can also make the items unlimited. For the shop NPC blueprint, we'll use shop NPC base as the parent class and set the NPC ID on the blueprint. Then, we can start creating the dialogue, starting with a beginning row that won't have any dialogue. This means the choices will be shown directly when the player interacts with the shop. We'll have a trade and a cancel choice, with trade selected as the choice action for the trade option and end dialogue for the cancel option. To trigger the trade action, we need to override the on-choice selected event in the blueprint and define the logic for it. We can call the show shop event when the trade action is triggered. After placing the shop NPC in the level, we can test it and expect to see 2 tabs in the shop. Lastly, we'll create 2 waypoints by adding them to the interactable data table and copying the IDs to the waypoint data table. Use Waypoint Base as the parent class when creating the Waypoint blueprint. But don't set the ID on the blueprint yet. Instead, set the ID after placing the blueprint in the level, as we'll have multiple instances of the same blueprint in the level. After setting the static mesh and adjusting the mouse detection component for the waypoints, we can override the on-activated event in the blueprint to change the material of the waypoint when it's active, making it easier for the player to see if it's active or not. Finally, we can place the waypoints in the level and add them to the waypoint controller. Before testing, we'll need to replace the existing waypoint data table in the corresponding composite data table with ours. With everything set up, we can press play and test. The first waypoint is always active by default, and we should be able to activate the second one and use it to travel to the first one and vice versa. Thank you for watching.